I didn't see it coming. At that point, life felt normal, or at least as normal as it could get in my family. My sibling's wedding was around the corner, and despite the usual distance between us, I was actually looking forward to it. I remember standing in my kitchen one quiet morning, ironing a shirt that wasn't even that important, half wondering if I should buy new shoes or just shine up the old pair. The iron hissed softly, filling the air with that faint, metallic steam smell, and my coffee sat on the counter, already going cold, like it always does when I get distracted. For a moment, I let myself picture the wedding, the lights, the music, the clinking of glasses, my siblings smiling, and me just blending in, maybe even laughing with them. For once, feeling like part of something bigger. That thought, it felt nice. Almost dangerous, but nice. Because the truth is, I've never really fit in with them. If family is a dinner table, I've always been the chair that doesn't quite match the set. Useful enough to keep around, sure, but never really belonging. Still, weddings are supposed to bring people together, right? Maybe this would be different. Maybe this would be one of those rare times where all the old tension and history could fade into the background, even just for one night that I wanted to believe it. So much so that I started planning a gift, not a last-minute one, but something thoughtful, personal. I wanted to show up right, to give them a reason to look at me, just for once, and see more than the outsider I've always been. Looking back, now, I realize how badly I wanted that moment, how much I was clinging to the idea of belonging. For a few days, I actually let myself believe it could happen, that I could walk into that room and not feel like the extra piece no one knows what to do with. And maybe that was my first mistake. At first, it was just small things, the kind of details you almost brush off. A missed call here, a family group photo there, little signs that something was happening without me. I told myself not to read into it. Families get busy before weddings, plans, fittings, endless errands. But then I started noticing more. My phone would buzz, and I'd glance down expecting a message about the wedding plans, only to find nothing, just silence. Later, someone would casually mention a rehearsal dinner, and I'd stand there, forcing a smile, pretending I already knew about it. That was the first time it hit me. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be in the loop at all. I'd scroll through social media at night, thumb hovering over pictures I wasn't tagged in, posts about family gatherings that I hadn't even heard about. My chest tightened in that way it does when you're trying not to care, when you tell yourself, it's fine. You weren't invited this time, but you will be next time. But then I remembered, this wasn't just any time. This was the wedding, the big one, the event where family should mean everything. And yet, somehow, I was already starting to feel like a ghost in it. It sounds dramatic, I know, but there's this kind of silence that stings worse than words. The kind where people don't say anything to you at all, and that nothingness starts to feel louder than any insult. I kept asking myself, am I imagining this? Am I being paranoid? Families fight, families forget, families get messy. But deep down, there was this whisper I couldn't ignore. They're leaving you out on purpose. I tried to shake it off. I remember one night sitting on my bed, phone in hand, scrolling through the family group chat that I wasn't a part of anymore. I didn't even notice when I got removed. That's how subtle it was. No ding, no pop-up, just gone. I stared at the screen, my own reflection faint in the black glass, and I thought, when did I become so easy to erase? Still, I kept giving them excuses. They're stressed. Weddings are hectic. They didn't mean to forget you. I rehearsed these lines in my head like mantras, trying to keep the doubt from eating me alive. But every time I opened my phone, every time I overheard another, "Oh, didn't you know?" I felt the truth pressing in a little harder. Maybe I wasn't paranoid. Maybe, for once, my worst suspicion was right. The call came on a Thursday evening. I wasn't expecting it. If anything, I thought maybe my sibling would finally reach out with some details about the big day. Instead, it was my dad. His name lit up my screen, and for half a second, I felt that stupid flicker of hope. You know the kind, where you think maybe this time the voice on the other end will sound warm. Maybe this time it'll feel like home. I answered with a cautious hey, trying not to sound too eager, but the tone I got back was clipped, almost rehearsed. No small talk. No how are you. Just a pause that felt like it stretched for miles before he said it. We all agree. You're not welcome at the wedding. I froze. The words didn't land right away. My mind went blank in that way it does when you've just heard something you can't quite process. At first, I thought maybe I misheard him, like maybe he said, "We all agree we can't wait to see you at the wedding." But no, he was clear. Too clear. My stomach dropped that I think I laughed. Actually, one of those dry, hollow laughs you let out when you're trying to hide the crack in your chest. "Wait, what?" I asked, my voice catching on the edge of disbelief. But he didn't soften. He didn't explain. He just said, "It's better this way. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Better this way." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, this mix of heat and cold running through me at the same time. Better for who? Better for them, of course. Easier to erase me than deal with me. And the worst part wasn't even his words. It was the way he said we. We all agree. As if the whole family had sat around a table, pointed their fingers, and voted me out. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But the truth is, I just sat there in silence, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the wall like it could give me answers. Memories started flooding in without warning. Me as a kid, running up to him with a drawing I'd made, his distracted nod while my siblings got the real praise. Birthdays where I was the afterthought. Dinners where I was the quiet one while they laughed around me. It was like all those moments I'd brushed off suddenly made sense. They weren't accidents. They were practice. Training for this very moment. When the call ended, abruptly, of course, I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there with the silence buzzing louder than the dial tone. My phone slipped out of my hand and hit the floor, and I just stared at it. Stared at the thing that had just carried my father's voice, telling me, once and for all, that I didn't belong. And the only thought running through my head was this: I should have known. After that call, silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was heavy, suffocating. I kept replaying his words in my head, over and over again. We all agree. It echoed like some cruel chant, and I couldn't shut it off. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every shadow in the room reminding me of some moment I tried to bury. Suddenly, all the little cracks in my family history lined up into one clear picture, and it hit me harder than I expected. I remembered birthdays where my siblings blew out candles surrounded by cheers, while mine always seemed rushed, an afterthought, almost like they were ticking a box rather than celebrating me. I remembered Christmas mornings where their stockings spilled over with gifts, and mine felt lighter. I used to tell myself it was just in my head, that I was being sensitive, but lying there in the dark after that phone call, I realized maybe I wasn't. Maybe I had been carrying their subtle exclusions my whole life, without daring to name it. One memory stuck sharper than the others. I must have been 8, maybe 9. We were all sitting around the dinner table, and I tried to tell a story from school, something about how I'd won a little spelling bee. No one listened. My dad cut me off to ask my brother about his soccer game, and just like that, the moment slipped away. I still remember staring down at my plate, tracing circles on it with my fork, feeling my chest ache in that way you don't know how to describe as a kid. That ache was the same one I felt now, as an adult. Listening to him tell me I wasn't welcome at the wedding. That it's strange how memories sharpen when you're hurt. It's like pain pulls everything into focus. I could almost smell the wood polish from that old dining table, hear the scrape of chairs on the floor, see the way my mom smiled at my siblings but barely looked at me. I had spent so long convincing myself those were just small oversights, not proof of anything. But maybe deep down, I'd always known. Sitting in my living room, phone still lying face down on the carpet, I felt like that same little kid again, small, invisible, replaceable. Only this time, the rejection wasn't subtle. It wasn't a smile that didn't quite reach me or a gift that felt like an afterthought. It was a sentence, direct, final, and yet, a part of me wondered why I was even surprised. Why did I expect this wedding to be different? Why did I let myself believe, even for a moment, that I'd finally be treated like I mattered? The truth was, this wasn't new. It was just louder, clearer, impossible to ignore. I sat there for hours, memories rolling over me like waves, and every one of them whispered the same thing: you've never really belonged here. The days after that call were some of the loneliest I've ever lived. Not because I was physically alone. I still went to work, still passed people on the street, still answered the usual, "How are you?" with a polite nod, but because I was carrying this secret humiliation no one else could see. It felt like I had this giant bruise on my chest, invisible to everyone but me. And then the question started. Innocent, harmless questions that cut deeper than a knife. A coworker asked me if I'd picked out my outfit for the wedding yet. Hey, friend laughed and said, "Big day coming up, huh? Your family must be over the moon." I forced a smile each time, nodding, pretending I was part of the excitement. But inside, I was screaming. How could I explain that my own family had decided the celebration would be better without me? How do you tell someone, "Actually, I've been voted out of my siblings' happiness"? Every interaction became a performance. I'd plaster on this mask of normalcy, like I wasn't crumbling inside. And the strangest part was, people didn't notice. Or maybe they didn't want to. They laughed, they joked, and I played along. And afterward, I'd go home and collapse into silence. My phone would buzz with another family post I wasn't included in, another reminder that life was moving forward without me. There's a special kind of humiliation that comes from being erased in public. Because it's not just that you're not wanted, it's that everyone assumes you are wanted. They assume you're in the room, that you're part of the joy, when in reality you're standing outside, nose pressed to the glass, pretending. You're warm while freezing in the cold. One afternoon, I bumped into an old neighbor at the grocery store. She lit up when she saw me and asked, "Oh, are you excited for the wedding? Big day for your family." Her voice was so cheerful, so innocent, and I just stood there holding a carton of milk, trying not to let the tears sting my eyes. I mumbled something about being happy for them, then turned away quickly, leaving half my groceries behind. In that moment, the shame felt unbearable, not just because I wasn't invited, but because I couldn't even say it out loud. I was too embarrassed to admit that my own family had closed the door on me. That's what humiliation does. It isolates you twice. First, you're excluded. Then, you're too ashamed to tell anyone you've been excluded. It's like building a prison inside your own chest, and every smile you fake just adds another bar to the cage. That night, I'd lie awake scrolling through photos of venues, dresses, and family dinners I'd never been told about. Everyone else seemed to be glowing with excitement, while I was left staring at the glow of a phone screen in the dark. It was like the whole world was moving in color, and I was stuck in black and white. And the more people assumed I'd be there, the more invisible I felt. There's only so much silence a person can take before it starts to feel like a scream inside your chest. That's where I was, walking around every day with this quiet, boiling anger that no one else could see. I'd be at work, typing an email, smiling politely at someone, but under the surface my mind was spinning in circles. They really said I wasn't welcome. My own family, my own father. The words dug in deeper with every replay, and it was like the more I tried to push them aside, the sharper they became. The humiliation had burned itself into me. But after a while, shame started to shift into something else, something hotter, heavier. Anger. Not the kind where you throw things across the room, but the kind that simmers so steadily you feel it in your bones. I remember one night I was sitting at my desk, staring at my phone, half hoping for a message that would undo everything. An apology, a text that said it was all just a misunderstanding. But of course, nothing came. Just silence. That's when it hit me. If they don't want me there, fine. But I won't sit here quietly while they erase me. That it wasn't about crashing the wedding or making a scene. That would have been too easy for them to twist into. See? That's why we didn't invite you. No. What I wanted was different. I wanted to reclaim something they'd taken from me. My dignity, my presence. I wanted them to know I existed, that they couldn't just lock me out of the story and pretend I was never part of it. That I pulled out a notebook and started writing things down. Not a revenge plan, not exactly. More like a declaration. What I wanted to say, what I wanted to stand for, what I would no longer tolerate. My pen pressed so hard into the page that the words imprinted on the sheet underneath. Each line I wrote made me feel a little stronger, a little more in control. Like I was building something out of the wreckage they'd left me. At one point, I caught my reflection in the dark window beside me. I looked tired, sure, but also steady. Different. My eyes had that look you get when you've finally made peace with a decision, even if it's a painful one. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't waiting for their approval, their scraps of acceptance. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had nothing left to lose. So yes, they had shut the door. But I was done standing on the other side, waiting to be let in. If they didn't want me at the wedding, then fine. I'd find my own way to remind them that I wasn't going to disappear quietly. They thought they'd broken me. What they didn't realize was that they'd just woken me up. The funny thing about anger is that, if you sit with it long enough, it starts to transform. At first, it was fire, wild, consuming, threatening to burn me from the inside out. But slowly, it cooled into something sharper, steadier. Resolve. I realized I didn't want a screaming match at the wedding. I didn't want to storm in and prove them right about whatever image of me they'd built in their heads. No, what I wanted was quieter, but far more powerful that I decided not to show up at all. Not in the way they expected, anyway. Instead, I chose to make my presence felt in a way they couldn't ignore. A gesture, not of revenge, but of dignity. Something that said, "You may have shut me out, but I won't let you erase me." That I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with a box in front of me. Inside were years of photographs, snapshots of birthday parties, vacations, even random afternoons in the backyard. Most of them were tilted in one direction. My siblings, smiling, front and center, and me somewhere on the edge, half in frame, half forgotten. I went through them slowly, one by one, and set a handful aside. Then I wrote a letter. Not bitter, not vengeful, but honest. Raw. The kind of letter you write when you've been holding things in for a lifetime. I told them what it felt like to grow up in the shadows of their attention, what it meant to be pushed aside, and finally, how it felt to hear those words. "We all agree, you're not welcome." I sealed the letter and slipped those photos inside. That was my unexpected move. Instead of standing in the back of a wedding hall, invisible in the corner, I sent a piece of myself directly into their celebration. I arranged for it to be delivered on the morning of the wedding, tucked neatly among the gifts. They would unwrap their joy, their toasts, their music, and there, waiting for them, would be my truth. I can only imagine their faces when they opened it. Maybe they laughed it off. Maybe they rolled their eyes. Or maybe, just for a second, they felt the weight of what they'd done. I'll never really know. And that's the point. I didn't do it for their reaction. I did it for me. To release everything I had carried quietly for years. To show myself that I didn't need a chair at their table to stand on my own 2 feet. That morning, while they were probably getting dressed and posing for photographs, I sat by my window with a cup of coffee. The same kind of coffee that always went cold because I got distracted, but this time, I drank it while it was still warm. I looked out at the street below, the world moving on like it always does, and for the first time in weeks, I felt light. Not happy, not healed, but free. In a way I hadn't expected. They thought my absence would be silent. They had no idea I would leave something louder than my presence. The wedding day came and went, and for me, it was just another Saturday. No suits, no speeches, no flashing cameras. I stayed home, kept the blinds half closed, and let the world move on without me. But even in the stillness of my apartment, I could feel the weight of what I'd done. Somewhere, in a crowded hall filled with laughter and champagne, my letter had arrived. My photos had been unfolded. My words, finally spoken, were sitting in their hands. At first, there was silence. Days passed without a single call, not even a text. I told myself I didn't care, that their reaction didn't matter. But of course, part of me wondered, did they read every word, or toss it aside without a second thought? Did my father feel even a flicker of guilt when he saw my handwriting? Or did he shake his head and dismiss it as drama? I'll never know for sure, but slowly, the whispers started to trickle back to me. A cousin reached out, quietly, almost like they weren't supposed to. I heard about the letter, they said, voice low. That was brave. Another family friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a message online. You did the right thing. You said what no one else could say. And then there were the less kind echoes too. Words passed around that I was bitter, jealous, trying to ruin their day. The fallout was messy, but strangely, it wasn't mine to carry anymore. For once, they were the ones spinning stories, defending themselves, whispering, behind closed doors. For once, I wasn't the silent outsider, waiting for a seat. I had spoken, and my voice, whether they liked it or not, had cut through the noise of their perfect celebration. That I thought I'd feel regret. I thought maybe, lying awake at night, I'd second-guess myself, wonder if I'd gone too far. But what I felt instead was lighter, like I'd finally set down a bag I didn't realize I'd been hauling on my back all these years. They had tried to erase me, and instead, I wrote myself back into the story, not as the forgotten sibling in the corner of the photo, but as someone who refused to vanish quietly. That I know some of them will never forgive me for it. Maybe they'll twist the narrative forever, paint me as the villain in their happily ever after. But that's fine. Let them. The truth is, for the first time, their opinion doesn't crush me the way it used to. Their silence doesn't scare me anymore. Because I realized something in that fallout. The power they had over me was the power I kept giving them. And I'm done handing it over. The night of the wedding, when I finally stepped outside, the air felt different. Cooler, sharper, like the world was reminding me I could still breathe on my own. I got in my car and just drove, no destination in mind, the kind of aimless driving you do when your head is too loud to sit still. The city lights blurred past my window, streaks of gold and red against the dark, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't rehearsing what I would say if they called, or how I'd defend myself if someone asked why I wasn't there. I was just driving. The hum of the tires on the road was strangely comforting, like white noise wrapping around me. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, though, and I could feel that tension still lingering in my chest. Because even with the small sense of freedom I'd earned, the ache was still there. No matter how strong I wanted to be, it still hurt. It hurt knowing my family had celebrated a milestone without me. And it hurt knowing my father's voice would probably never soften when he spoke about me again. But as the miles rolled on, another thought began to push its way through the ache. Maybe family isn't just the people you share blood with. Maybe family is the people who actually want you there, who don't measure your worth against their expectations, who don't vote you out of their happiness like you're some unwanted guest. I thought about the friends who had checked in, the people who quietly told me I was brave for saying what they never could. I thought about the silence of my apartment that morning, sipping coffee while the rest of them got dressed for photos, and how, even though I was alone, I didn't feel invisible anymore, that I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror at a red light. My eyes looked tired, yes, but there was something else in them too. A steadiness I hadn't noticed before. For so long, I'd been waiting for my family to give me permission to belong. But out there, driving under a sky that didn't care about weddings or family drama, I realized I didn't need their permission. Belonging wasn't something they could hand me like a favor. It was something I had to claim for myself. By the time I turned back toward home, the roads were nearly empty. Just me, headlights cutting through the dark, and this quiet sense that maybe, just maybe, I was finally learning how to let go. The hurt was still there, but it no longer owned me. It was just part of the story, not the whole thing. And as I pulled into my driveway, I whispered to myself the thing I had been too scared to say out loud before. I deserve better than this. The days after the wedding stretched out in a strange quiet. No dramatic confrontations. No sudden apologies. Just silence. The kind that can either eat you alive or give you space to finally breathe. For a while, I didn't know which way it would go. I'd wake up, stare at my phone, half expecting some angry message, half hoping for something softer. But neither came. And maybe that was the answer I needed all along. Closure, I realized, doesn't always arrive neatly wrapped with explanations or reconciliations. Sometimes it comes in the absence of what you thought you wanted. No apologies, no family sit-downs, no dramatic, let's fix this. Just the understanding that they showed me who they were, and I finally believed them. That's the kind of closure that stings at first, but slowly, it settles into clarity. That I started focusing on smaller things, things that were mine alone. Quiet mornings with coffee by the window, evening walks where the air felt cool and forgiving. Picking up old hobbies I'd abandoned when all my energy was spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I wasn't magically healed overnight, but I felt myself shifting, like I'd taken a step out of their shadow and into my own light. There were moments, of course, where the sadness hit me again. Birthdays, holidays, random Tuesdays when I'd scroll through photos online and see their smiling faces. But instead of spiraling into the old loop of why wasn't I enough, I started catching myself, reframing it. Maybe it was never about me not being enough. Maybe it was about them not being capable of loving me in the way I deserved. That shift, it didn't erase the pain, but it made it lighter to carry, and slowly, new connections began to mean more. Friends who became chosen family. Strangers who turned into support systems. Even my own voice, which I'd silenced for so long, grew louder in my life. I spoke up more. I set boundaries. I let myself believe that I had worth outside of what my family thought of me. Looking back now, that wedding, what was supposed to be just another day in their perfect narrative, became the day I finally stopped waiting for permission to exist. In my own story, it was the day I realized that being unwanted in one place doesn't mean you're unwanted everywhere. It was the day I chose myself, and if there's one thing I've taken with me, it's this. Sometimes being shut out is the universe's way of pointing you toward the doors you were always meant to walk through. So no, I wasn't at the wedding. I wasn't in the pictures. I wasn't in the speeches. I wasn't part of the carefully crafted memory they'll look back on. But I was here, breathing, standing, moving forward, writing my own ending instead of waiting for theirs to include me. And honestly, that feels like the kind of closure I can live with.